Brothers and sisters, as a body is one though it has many parts, and all the parts of the body, though many, are one body, so also Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slaves or free persons, and we were all given to drink of the one Spirit. Now the body is not a single part, but many. If a foot should say, "Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body," it does not for this reason belong any less to the body. Or if an ear should say, "Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body," it does not for this reason belong any less to the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God placed the parts, each one of them, in the body as He intended. If they were all one part, where would the body be? But as it is, there are many parts, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, "I do not need you," nor again the head to the feet, "I do not need you." Indeed, all the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are all the more necessary, and those parts of the body that we consider less honorable, we surround with greater honor. And our less presentable parts are treated with greater propriety, whereas our more presentable parts do not need this. But God has so constructed the body as to give greater honor to a part that is without it, so that there may be no division in the body, but that the parts may have the same concern for one another. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer with it. If one part is honored, all the parts share its joy. Now you are Christ's body, and individually parts of it. Some people God has designated in the church to be first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then mighty deeds, then gifts of healing, assistance, administration, and varieties of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work mighty deeds? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A wise preacher once said, "At the heart of ministry is relationship." If this is true, then what stops that heart from pumping and keeping the body alive is division, a break in the relationship. It's that disunity which Pope Benedict recently called one of the gravest sins that disfigure the Church's face. Or what the Second Vatican Council called, they said, division openly contradicts the will of Christ, provides a stumbling block to the world, and inflicts damage on the most holy cause of proclaiming the good news to every creature. In case you didn't know it, this week was a week of prayer for Christian unity. And I don't know about you, but it didn't affect me very much. It just kind of went by. Maybe went to the lecture today, which is not necessarily for Christian unity, but Muslim and Christian dialogue, but in the same vein of unity among the human family. So what difference has it made? Or do we consider this someone else's job, a job for the theologians focusing on ecumenism or interfaith dialogue, for the experts, not my problem? Well, Paul says, "In one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, and we were all given to drink of the one Spirit." So this responsibility is not just for the experts, the theologians, it's for all the baptized. John Paul II wrote in his encyclical letter on ecumenism, "How is it possible to remain divided if we have been buried through baptism in the Lord's death, in the very act by which God, through the death of His Son, has broken down the walls of division?" So how have we responded to this mandate of the gospel? I admit it is a rather tough teaching, Because there's so many ways that not only have we failed to contribute to the unity of the church, of the human family even, that we've deepened the divisions through our apathy, or maybe even through our active disunity. We've chosen to be ignorant. We've insulated ourselves, needing to protect ourselves from what is different, what could maybe contaminate us in our minds. We've maybe actively fostered division. We've had arguments. We make jokes. We have stereotypes. We stop listening. We judge. All these uncharitable thoughts and deeds and words that create more division. Of course, this is not just a problem of interfaith dialogue or ecumenism. Right within our own Catholic Church, isn't there the same environment of division? Even within our community, we see that pulling apart, that break of relationships that cripples us, makes us unable to minister. All the bickering and the disease stop us from engaging the external issues because we're focused on the internal. So how can we take up the mission of the new evangelization that we're called to, this mission that seeks to show the face of Christ to a world that rejects him? How can we do this when the Christ we bring is so disfigured as to be unrecognizable? Those of you who have been in class or lectures with Eleanor Stump knows she uses the image of the body just like St. Paul does, but it usually involves chopping parts of it off. So she'll give the example of, if I chop off your hands, your arms, your legs, whatever, you're still you as long as you're alive. It could be painful, and you're not quite as God intended you, and you have an impoverished ability. What you're supposed to be able to do, you can no longer do, but you're still you. So it is with the church. The church is still alive, but not working to the potential, to the plan that God has. Paul says, if one part suffers, all parts suffer with it. It's not just a cute little slogan. It's true, isn't it? There is a dynamic relationship between the whole and the parts. The greater systems and structures that create division affect us individually. And in turn, the sins of our lives and the divisions that tear us apart contribute to the disease of the church. I think it's very hard to navigate this course. How much diversity before we become divided? How much unity before we become inert? Paul says, the body is not a single part, but many. So the solution is not uniformity, making the opposition disappear or become just like me. That's not the way that God created the body. I think he offers the true solution here, which is humility and understanding. He says that some parts believe that they're unimportant, too weak, too unpresentable to be part of the body. Others think that all the parts should be like them. Both are suffering from a lack of humility. And insecurity, they're on the defensive. And when we're like that, it's crucial that we find an identity, that we understand how we are an honorable part of the body. We have to solidify our identity by delineating our principles and our practices, defining who we are and who we're not. And that's a good and necessary thing. We can't confuse the eye for the ear or the hand for the foot. We must first know who we are and our place and our function in the body. But to know ourselves doesn't mean that we have to reject all the other parts of the body. We cannot separate ourselves, first of all, thinking that we can live apart from the rest. When separated from the heart of the relationship, which is Christ, we die. But neither can we insist that all the other parts be like us. If all were eyes, it would be no longer a body, but a crowd of narcissists looking at themselves. Paul says, but as it is, God placed all the parts, each one of them, in the body as he intended. More than that, God has somehow already redeemed the church through his death and resurrection. We see that even this brokenness, the deadly, heartbreaking division, has already been carried by Christ on the cross, according to God's plan. John Paul II wrote, "All the sins of the world were gathered up in the saving sacrifice of Christ, including the sins committed against the church's unity, the sins of Christians, those of the pastors no less than those of the lay faithful. Even after the many sins which have contributed to our historical divisions, Christian unity is possible, provided that we are humbly conscious of having sinned against unity and are convinced of our need for conversion." Yes, there's questions to be answered. There are dialogues that we have to engage in, doctrines to clarify and correct, and overcoming the deep-rooted issues, that's not easy. It takes work. But what the pastors of the church have said, from St. Paul down to Pope Benedict, they say that it must begin with conversion and hope. There must come a time when we lay down our weapons and stop pointing fingers and name-calling, when we see ourselves and our church for what it really is, good and bad, and when we see the relationship with God as the heart of our mission and of our lives, when we learn to relate to one another as sons and daughters of the same God who will bring peace and unity if we just allow. I think the words of the psalmist sum it up rather well. "Come and see the works of the Lord, who has done fearsome deeds on the earth, who stops wars to the ends of the earth, breaks the bow, splinters the spear, and burns the shield with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations, exalted on the earth."